My guest today is Mr. Trevor Roberts from Dolphin Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy. They are based in Poole and Bournemouth, where they have clinics. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning, Alan. Nice to see you.
Before we talk about therapeutic treatments and looking after people's mental health, let's talk about today's subject, which is grammar. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you are a well-read man. You've read lots of books and got a doctorate and all kinds of things.
Indeed.
So I imagine your grammar is pretty good because you would have lost marks for it when you were a younger man trying to get your PhD through.
Well, if I pay attention, it's good. However, I get a little bit irritated myself with people who get too tied up about language, and particularly swear words and things like grammar. At the end of the day, it's a form of communication, and words generally are used for emphasis. So providing that the communication is clear and gets across in the right way, I don't really see that the grammar or what people would call bad language is actually such a bad thing.
But the thing is, you wouldn't know, would you? Because you're a therapist, so you're going to be a very embracing character. The last thing you're going to be is going to go to someone, well, actually, I don't want to give you treatment because your pronunciation of that particular...
Exactly right.
I shouldn't really be asking you. If there was someone who would be an all-embracing character, it's going to be someone who specialises in therapy.
We'd like to think so, at least most of the time.
Yeah, I bet there are when you're sat looking at emails and things, or someone's charging you money, and you think, look at that, they couldn't even be bothered to get that spelling. But then you're thinking that should be
exactly.
right.
I mean, when you're dealing with a company and they're doing something which irritates the hell out of you, then obviously you tend to get a little bit prejudiced and you filter out all the good things and harness and notice the bad. That's just human nature, unfortunately. It's the way the mind processes. So, yeah, there is an element like that. You'll probably pick it up more quickly if it's something that's annoying you than if it's something you enjoy talking to.
Sure. Now, you've been in the world of, what should we call it, therapeutic provision, this sort of looking after people's mental health for quite a while?
I'd say the broad spectrum term would be psychotherapeutic intervention, and there are many. That's why there's not one psychotherapeutic intervention. If there was one that worked for everybody in every case, there'd only be one type of therapy.
Sure.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Sadly, that's not the case, and no single intervention on its own works for everybody in every case. And I think one of the problems we have in mental health today is that we rely too much on people who are specialists in one particular area and have no umbrella understanding of other interventions and what might be appropriate for that particular individual client in front of them.
And I feel the media are slightly guilty there because, for 1 week we are adoring mindfulness and claiming that it is the future. Then suddenly we're talking about the NHS offering CBT treatment. Within 6 weeks I can stop you smoking. And then psychoanalysis might come in and we're all back to Freud in the early 1900s. Indeed. All of a sudden. And the media do tend to enjoy perhaps quick fix and books, and we don't really want to get into the complicated point that you raise, which we've got billions of neural pathways and every human's different, and therefore that treatment needs to be tailored.
Well, it's the nature of the world these days. We live in such a fast-moving world. I mean, for God's sake, supermarkets sell ready grated cheese. People don't have the time to grate cheese. I see that as a warning.
Whoa. I love ready grated cheese.
It's great stuff, but the fact is it proves that people do not any longer have time to grate their own cheese. Now, I consider that a warning sign.
Maybe.
So, because we live in such an instant world, people are looking for instant answers and for fast fixes. And unfortunately, certainly where the mind's concerned, which is so vastly complicated, there aren't any.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to pull you up there a little bit, Trevor, because grated cheese, right? Yes, it is. However, we have faster cars and quicker washing machines and quicker dishwashers. And it's just in that same thing. Although, in fairness, for a bit of support, I read that the demise of the orange was due to the fact that when people looked at it in market research, they went, I haven't got time to peel an orange.
This is exactly what I'm saying.
But they did
people
say
don't have that kind of
they
time.
would buy
ready peeled oranges. Exactly. This is exactly what I'm saying. It's a pretty sad reflection on the state of the world, really, isn't it? I think time has actually genuinely become a more important commodity than money for most people these days. It really has, and that's hence why people look for instances. It's one of the reasons why we are moving more and more towards a worldwide base and doing a lot of Skype counselling, a lot of telephone-based stuff rather than face-to-face. Because for a lot of people who are very busy, particularly people in the corporate world, it's hard enough to find an hour for therapy, never mind the half an hour each way to actually get there and back as well. So, for example, we've seen a meteoric rise just in the last 10 years in the offering of telephone and Skype therapeutic services.
Okay. So we are talking therapy broadly. We thought we'd just focus in on OCD for a moment, but if you've got a question you would like to ask about therapy, we were looking at OCD, so if you think you suffer from it, or quick tips maybe to help, or members of the family you want some help on, you're welcome to get in touch with the show. Trevor won't mind. He's the business that he runs covers all aspects of different problems that we may have and want help for, and so he's a very robust robust character, so we won't mind which way it goes. But you're welcome to get in touch with the show. Normal numbers, 0345 30 39 61 on the phones, 81333 and the first word Solent on the text, and on the email Alan, alun.newman@bbc.co.uk. And I appreciate with mental health, people do like to send messages, sometimes in preference. If you've got the confidence to give us a call, talk about what you're dealing with, that's great. But it can be a little bit, I suppose people are a bit more protective over mental health as we all become a bit more used to it. It's become a bit more fluid. There was a time when it wasn't even mentioned.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's still, even now, for certain people, a stigma about seeking help. And as I always try and encourage people to understand it, it's really just having a professional friend. Not everyone's got a friend they can talk to. And unfortunately, even those of it that do have good friends, they've always, because of the nature of the relationship, they have some sort of bias or agenda of their own. So speaking to a professional really is just a good way of looking at it is talking to a professional friend who will be completely unbiased.
Okay, let's look at some of the questions coming in. Can you counsel yourself? And that must be a reflection of books that you get to help you. So is it possible for people to bypass your skills and counsel themselves out of a psychological condition?
It is. That the problem, of course, you've got is for most people, particularly the more intelligent they are, the more they go through self-help books, the more ambiguities they'll find, and there'll be questions that will raise and think, well, does it mean that or does it mean this? Because you'll also find that in pretty much in any one book, there'll be certain paragraphs which contradict others that are early in the book, so it can cause a lot of confusion. I'm a great believer in self-help. I often have people come to me and say, well, I'm seeing another therapist, or I'm doing this course, or I'm doing this particular book. Is that a problem? No, the way I look at it, I want you to get better as soon as possible. So the more intervention you get in, the more help you get in from whatever quarter, whether it be a book or whether it's something else, that's a great thing. But the caveat I'd put with books is that, that I've read about, I think I've got about 600 on my shelves at the moment, and, there are some very good ones. There's probably about 10 or 12 that, having filtered through all the rest are Bibles to me, and others that, you pick up little bits from. So certainly books and self-help is great. I don't think it's the whole answer, but then nothing is. So in answer to, broadly speaking, to the question, is it possible to counsel yourself? Yes, it is. But it does have its downside and its disadvantages like everything.
Okay. Message here, I'm just going to summarise it from Elaine. Her son, who's now in her 30s, has been diagnosed with OCD. She believes that this was brought about when he was at school in his teens. He went through a phase of being bullied terribly, became very anxious, started having panic attacks, fell into depression. Later on in life, he had a breakdown and was diagnosed with OCD when he was 19. The order brought him some comfort. It wasn't the classic form of OCD like washing hands that we tend to see on television. So is the point that Elaine's making there that obsessive compulsive disorder is born out of something else? Is it a reason? Do you do
Absolutely.
Those things because of reason? Talk to me about OCD, sort of your understanding
Absolutely.
of where it comes from.
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to understand that OCD, or Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, is a term used by the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used by psychiatrists.
Whoa, too fast for me. Too fast, Trevor. I'm making notes as you speak.
It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used by psychiatrists to diagnose certain disorders. But it's an umbrella term. It's actually at least 4 separate conditions in itself, because you have obsessive thought, you have obsessive behaviour, you have compulsive thought and compulsive behaviour, all of which are different. Also, there's a range of these levels of condition, because everybody has a little bit of OCD in them. In fact, in some respects, it can be a useful thing. For example, if you're an air traffic controller, I would want you to be a little bit OCD. I'd want you to be careful and a little bit more particular than other people. So anything that we term as condition is just an extreme exaggeration of a perfectly normal behavioural trait. As for where it stems from, OCD and control issues, in fact, OCD itself is a control mechanism. It's really the mind's attempt to escape from an intolerable reality. So, for example, if you are terrified that someone you love might die, if you can reason and justify to yourself that if you go through that ritual of spinning round 3 times before you operate every door handle, then they will stay alive. Now, that implies a level of control which simply doesn't exist. It's kind of godlike thinking. But in terms of the person and the individual with it, in the absence of any better way to feel safe, it will do for now, in the absence of a better way of doing it. So that's where some of these things come from. They always stem from childhood. Trauma in childhood is a very, very profound thing. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Basically, the experiences we have, particularly between the ages of 3 and 5, are fundamental. We are all born confident. Babies are completely confident at the moment they're born that when someone cries, that someone will come and attend to their needs. What happens is, as we go through lives, particularly early lives, we hang on to some negative emotion and some of the experiences and the message we receive verbally and non-verbally from other key people in our lives. It's that begins to act as blocks to that natural flow of confidence.
Okay.
Once the confidence goes, then the anxiety starts. That's when we start to develop OCD behaviours. So whatever it may be, I can pretty much guarantee you it will stem from experiences in childhood that were traumatic.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the treatments, I think, forgive me if I get the terminology wrong, one of the treatments that you specialise in your practice is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Indeed.
And a very little of that goes back into the past. A lot of that is about, right, okay, what can we do? Let's get some action going to help you. Is that because if I was sat here as a client, and we've had a nice chat and I've told you about my story, but fundamentally you're going, look, Alan, you can't leave your house unless it takes you an hour to get out of your house because you've checked the fridge, you've checked the gas, you've checked the windows.
Times.
Now, the fact that your mother was incredibly mean to you is sad, maybe relevant, but in order to get some action going, this is what we're going to do as an action plan. Because CBT is a bit more, if you were to look at the NHS, they love it. They can't get enough of it. In 5 weeks, they'll fix you, they claim, because they give you some forms to fill out, and they're not interested in your past so much. They want to give you some pointers. Is that how it works?
Well, the problem is there's no single intervention that works for everybody in every case, and that's why we have a very integrative style in my practice. CBT is wonderful. It has lots of merits. And it's great for dealing with the cognitive level stuff. At the end of the day, the reason why you're broken or the reason why you're struggling is definitely going to stem from childhood at some level. Does that actually affect what you do about it now? Probably not. Understanding what happened and why you feel the way you do, that's a beginning. It's not an end. So where CBT then comes into it is to teach you to cognitive structures and processing so that you can look at things in a different way, change your basic belief structures and automatic thought process, which then, of course, in turn affects how you feel and behave in a positive way. But again, even CBT on its own, in my view, is a limited intervention. I've seen people go around week after week, month after month, sometimes year after year with CBT, getting absolutely nowhere. The premise behind CBT that's done in this country is it's a little bit like if you teach a man to fish, then you feed him for life. If you give him a fish, then you only feed him for a day. And I have every sympathy with that particular line of thought. However, if you have a child who's struggling with the rudiments of mathematics, telling that child you have complete faith in their ability to work it out for themselves and empowering them and encouraging them is great, is of no practical use whatsoever. So sometimes it's a little bit more involved in that.
Sure.
You need a range of other interventions.
So just reading some of these as they come in, I really enjoy the OCD cleaning shows that are on TV. I think they're hilarious, watching these people be put into awful situations where they nearly vomit. Is this good for them or bad for them? Now, this would be a comment on the TV show Obsessive Compulsive Cleaners, I think it is, where they take people with OCD who are hoovering 12 times a day and love the smell of bleach. What do you think about those shows? Because we do take people with some significant mental challenges,
Sure.
And then we enjoy laughing, would you say? We enjoy looking at them thinking, oh gosh, that looks awful, but their house is at least clean. We meet someone else.
It makes us realise we're not as bad as we thought.
Yeah,
That's
we pair them up with someone who hasn't cleaned their house in 40 years because they went through a terrible divorce. And then we sit and watch the outcome. But on a mental health basis, is that good telly?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And we could, how long have you got? It's good entertainment, let's put it that way. And drawing comparisons between extremes will always raise a smile or two, I'm sure. And really that's the key thing. Any of these behaviours...
But do you think, sorry to interrupt, but do you think as a practitioner in this field, I'm not asking you to comment on all TV output, but as a practitioner in this field, is that acceptable for us to be doing that, do you think?
I think it is.
Okay.
As long as it's people who are not being taken advantage of, who are desperately distressed and aren't really aware of what they're getting into when they agree to do the show.
Okay.
I think as long as they're fully aware of what's going on and they're happy about it and can laugh at themselves, I don't think there's any problem with that. Like I said, there are times when OCD can be a very useful thing. If you're a cleaner,
yes.
if you're an air traffic controller, I'd want you to be a little bit OCD.
You don't mind laughing about it a little bit. I thought you would come in and be stern and serious
most
about
people
it.
think they do. I mean, I get all sorts of comments. I mean, particularly because I use a lot of hypnosis, and it's one of my areas of special interest and expertise. So people come in and they think, "Oh God, don't look at his eyes; you'll be out like that."
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with voice. It's all done. It's nothing to do with eyes. It's all done with the voice and language patterns. So in the same way, people think that all therapists are going to be very stiff and starchy and very official, and it's not the case at all. Humour's an important intervention in itself.
Right.
If you can get people, at least at the start, to laugh a little bit at what they're doing and see the silliness in it, at least you've made an inroad. At least you're getting somewhere.
Yeah, and you've relaxed their mind because
exactly.
when you are, I mean, I was thinking back to one of these TV shows. I mean, I don't mind watching them. I often thought, I wished, and don't forgive me, this sounds wrong, but I did wish I married someone who was slightly more OCD because I just felt,
Have to do some
because
cleaning.
I would say on the scale, I'm on the OCD scale, and if you are on that scale, then you tend to, I meet people, friends of mine, and if they we talk about cleaning tips together, and I think to myself, we're sad, but wouldn't it be great if we all hung out together?
Absolutely. The cleanest house in the town.
Yeah, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? So we were after your calls. Wonder whether you struggle with OCD, whether you find it funny, whether you live with a partner who has OCD. Then it would be nice to hear from you. 0345 30 30 961 is the number to call. You're hearing the voice of Trevor Roberts, and Trevor, essentially people go to see him when it's got a bit too much, I guess, Trevor, and they now think, I can't live with this anymore. What was mildly amusing once is becoming crippling to my life.
That's exactly it. It's exactly that. It's fine and it's funny when it's not getting in the way of your life, but when it starts to become rituals you have to perform that mean you can't get out the door, you can't get to the interview on time, and you can't make it to work on time, then it's not funny anymore, and that's when it's probably likely you need a little bit of intervention.
What have you had come in, just before we do the weather? What's an example of someone that, I doubt you get to surprise anymore, but what's an example when you thought, actually, that is quite severe? Give me a client example.
One of the most serious ones I had was somebody who literally had to wash their hands 88 times before they left the bathroom. Now, if you actually just think of what that's doing to your skin in terms of damage, never mind the practicalities in terms of time, that's pretty serious. But that's a fairly extreme example.
Yeah.
And that's what we put into what we call rituals. It usually stems from a guilt complex.
Do you think we all have rituals? Do you think everyone listening to this has rituals, maybe even they're not aware of them?
Depends what you call a ritual. I mean, again, it's about extremes. I mean, there are rituals every time you go to open a door. If you didn't go through a ritual that you'd practiced thousands of times, you wouldn't know how to
I suppose
open it.
I mean the ones that, I was just trying to think of one, but mine, for example, is family holidays. I'm always last to leave, and I do a sweep of the house, like I'm special forces, checking the taps, curtains, that sort of thing. And I couldn't leave without
perfectly
it.
norble behavior and good sense.
I would
there's nothing wrong
agree.
with that.
I would agree too. Wish my wife would agree as she's shouting in the car, going, "Come on, you've been in there for so long." I wasn't sure I checked that tap or not. Let's go back and do it again. Right, don't go away. In the studio with me is Trevor Roberts, hypnotherapist and psychotherapist. He runs the clinics, the Dolphin Clinics in Poole and Bournemouth. You can find them easily online. Are you an Elvis fan, Trevor?
I am. I like all sorts of different types of music.
You're quite well turned out. I mean, you've got a three-piece suit on. I'm imagining classy, drive a BM, immaculately tidy inside, bit of OCD.
I think I've got the absolute perfect physique for radio, actually.
I always say about myself, I used to say face for radio, voice for CFAX.
That's the one.
But unfortunately now CFAX isn't as popular. So when I do this joke with all the young people in the office, they just look at me and think,
what is that?
I've got no idea. Okay, we're talking about OCD primarily, but also other things. I mean, Trevor's got a wide-ranging skill base, but we thought we'd start with OCD because there's so many things out there we could be talking about. Lisa's in Ringwood. Lisa, good afternoon to you.
Hi there, hi.
So OCD, it's in your life via your son, is it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, my son is suffering with OCD, that's right, and has done for some years, yeah.
And is he? Are you saying OCD because you've self-diagnosed it and you recognise it from sort of TV shows, or has it got a lot worse than that and you've had to go and get a diagnosis?
We're in the process of doing that at the moment. I've been to see a GP, both of us, my son and myself, and we're in the process of getting a formal diagnosis, I guess. But, he presents it in the hand washing and obsessive thoughts.
Okay, well, we've got Trevor Roberts here, and so this is an aspect that he specialises in. So feel free to throw any questions his way. He's very robust. If he doesn't know the answer, he'll just say, I don't know. But can he be of any help to you?
Lovely. Yeah, he could be. My
Hi,
son's
Lisa.
been suffering. Hi there. My son's been suffering with chronic hand washing really since the age of 9. It presented itself at junior school. Then it seemed to sort of get better. I went to the school and they hadn't noticed a problem at school. It was mainly at home. Then it seemed to stop, and then it presented itself again in teenage years. However, we didn't sort of recognise it then because I just thought the hand washing wasn't so bad. It was just more the mood swings and that. And we just put it down to that he was a moody teenager, shut himself in a room a lot, in his bedroom a lot and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, the hand washing, about 18 months ago, became a lot worse. So bad that I was just making the call in when you were talking about someone who washed their hands about 88 times. I guess he must wash his hands when he's preparing a meal at home. He must wash his hands at least 40 times. Every time he touches the bin, every time he touches taps, turns the oven on, that sort of thing. He can't open a front door without putting a jumper over his hands. If I walk past him, he's holding his hands up in the air. His hands are
So what this is sounding like, it's sounding like it's actually, there's an element of phobia of germs in this as well. It's not just simply an OCD behaviour. Okay. So it's a little bit more complex than just OCD. I mean, it is without a doubt an obsessive behaviour. But it sounds to me it is more like a phobia of germs, which is a slightly different thing.
Yeah, exactly. The fridge is a big thing in our household as well. Everything has to be stored, which we should do. We know we should do.
Well, but by the same token, people survived for many, many years before we had fridges and these things, so it's not as fatal as we'd sometimes like to think. Now, I'm not saying we should be uncleanly, but what I am saying is that sometimes we do go a little bit overzealous. Certainly with something like your son's behaviour, what he's basically trying to do, in a nutshell, from the psyche point of view, he's trying to control the uncontrollable. He's afraid that something's going to happen which will ultimately lead to his death or somebody else's death, and he's trying to adapt control behaviours to ensure that doesn't happen. Which is almost in a sense kind of godlike thinking. It's quite normal because what it is, I think I mentioned earlier on, it's the mind's escape from an intolerable reality. But certainly when it's got to that stage, if he's watching, can I just ask? You say it's around about 45. Does he actually count the number of times he washes his hands?
No, we don't. I am guesstimating, really. I have to say, and he thinks it's quite normal, really. I think.
Yeah, they usually do. They justify it to themselves. People can justify all sorts of things to themselves.
What do you think, Trevor, this is slightly mean with Trevor, but it is intriguing, Lisa, hearing you recount that story. But Trevor, a little bit of space then. If you were meeting Lisa's son for the first time, or if you were advising the family on some things that they could do if they wanted to change this behaviour, where do you begin? I appreciate you need to meet the client. We said that very clearly at the beginning. But where do you begin when Lisa's sort of thinking, right, I'm going to call that radio show to get some tips from that guy? And what are we actually saying with regards to that might be useful to Lisa?
Well, the first thing I say is be understanding and supportive, which I'm sure you are. But be supportive in a way of trying to understand what it is he's trying to achieve. What is it you're actually trying to prevent? What is it about germs that worry you? What's the what if, the scary movie you make in your mind? When you played worst case scenario and you don't wash your hands, what do you see happening in your mind? What's the worst case scenario? Where's it going to go? If you can get inside that, you're on the right road home, or at least to begin with. Also, what it's a little bit extreme with your son, I think. It probably needs some intervention beforehand, but what we try and do at some point is get them to the point where they feel comfortable enough to send their behaviours on vacation for a day or two and see what happens. So it's an experiment, if you like.
Yeah. Okay.
Lisa, do you? I mean, in fairness to Trevor, right at the beginning, it's sort of hearing your story is intriguing. But obviously, Trevor needs to sit with that person. But is it something that you worry about for him? Do you feel like?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it got so bad that last year he moved away from home because he couldn't cope. And it's definitely something within the home that he finds. I think out and about. I mean, he socialises. He goes out and about. He goes away on sort of weekends away with his friends. But interestingly enough, he left home last year, and I think it was an escapism from the house, from the home, from being around us.
Does he wash his hands when he's out and about? Is he washing his hands then, or is it really only in the home?
I think it's only within the home. Yeah, it is. Although if he drops something on the floor, he won't pick it up. Like I was out with him a few weeks ago, and he dropped a packet of tissues. He would not pick it up. I thought, well, I'm not leaving litter around. I will pick it up, but I don't make an issue of it.
Okay.
I have not made an issue of it at all. But I've had breakdowns myself. I've been in tears over it. It's definitely sort of affecting the family.
Sure. Because because you want the best for your son. Yeah, I can see that.
Absolutely.
Lisa,
Absolutely.
we'll take this on for a little bit of a chat. We've got some more callers waiting in the wings, but I want to thank you, Lisa, for having the courage to call BBC Radio Solent and talk about it, because
thank
I
you
think
for listening.
sometimes
Yeah.
we see these things on telly and have a bit of a laugh, but behind it, there are parents and people really wrestling with this. So, Lisa, thank you so much. Have a good weekend. We'll talk a bit more about it. That's Lisa in Ringwood. Before we go to Paul in Southampton, I saw your eyebrows move, Trev, when you heard that it happened mainly in the home. Why did your eyebrows move then?
Because that's interesting. I mean, normally when people have those kind of rituals with hand washing or fear of germs, it is something that's applicable in all walks of their lives. That's if you can get them to go out at all, which in a lot of cases you can't. Well, it's interesting, Lisa did say that if he drops a packet of tissues on the floor when he's out, he won't pick them up. So clearly it is still there when he's out and about. It's just more manifest when it's in the home. And there can be a variety of reasons to that. Without seeing him, it'd be impossible to say.
If I was you, Trev, my struggle when I look at you, you're a very composed character, but when people bring their story, there's this great wave of information that comes with a lot of emotion, and I would be thinking, I don't know where to start. I don't know whether it's the tap or the floor or the fridge, or is it in his past, or does it not really matter? And I would be having I appreciate you've had extensive training, but is there a part of you that's looking for key snippets of information, or do you just think, I'm going to let this story wash over me, and then we'll start as we always do with OCD, this is the path we take?
Well, all the professional therapists out there are going to hate me for this, but actually, when you're overwhelmed with information like that, you have to go with a gut feel. And that only comes from years of experience. So it is actually a point now where in most of these situations I'm absorbing information, but there's certain things that will just click in with me that I'll hold into,
you get it.
and you get that gut feel. You kind of know where they're at.
And that's why you'd meet the client. It's quite sad, not sad, but it is an emotional thing for Lisa as a mum, who clearly is slightly heartbroken for her son, because she wants to fix it for him. I guess, of course, what parent wouldn't?
Exactly.
A parent, I guess you can't force someone into therapy, can you, until they want to go? You
Indeed,
can't
you can't.
march them into your office and go,
No.
Here he is, his name's Keith, he's driving me around the bend, and you're not going to get anywhere with him.
No, absolutely. I mean, it always makes me laugh when we have people ask us if we do gift vouchers. You think I'm kidding?
That's a great... you should do it.
Oh, we do?
You should
do.
But
it's usually just for smoke stop programs and things like that.
Here's some dolphin therapy gift vouchers. Give them to your wife.
Well, if you need a raffle prize at any point, Alan, do let me know, won't you?
That's great. Now, Paul is in Southampton. Paul, good afternoon to you.
Hello.
Paul, we've been talking about OCD. It's a roller coaster of sort of coming to terms with it, but hearing very sad stories. OCD in your life or someone else's life? What's your story?
Mine and somebody else's. I have been diagnosed with it. I've had it all my life, and my mother's got it. So I'm not 100% sure, nor were any of the therapists that I've seen, whether it is actually hereditary. In my case, I know it can be, or whether it's not. It's the fact that from the year dot, I've seen my mother carry out OCD rituals, and I've just caught it from observations. But it certainly affects my life every day, from the moment I get up to the time I go to bed.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say there about hereditary. Just to put your mind at rest a little bit, any of these conditions that can be termed hereditary, what that means is you may have a hereditary predisposition to develop it. It doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion.
Okay.
There are people that live with these conditions whose parents or grandparents perhaps had it and don't develop it. It is, in my view, and there's an age-old debate on this, is it nurture or nature? I think it's a combination of both, but I think in my view it's a lot more about nurture. Children have a tendency to learn what they live and then go on and live what they've learned. So having been around this as a child and seen this, you would have inherited, if you like, some of those coping mechanisms of your mother's as behaviours yourself. You'd have taken them on. In the same way a child learns to walk and talk by imitating and mimicking their parents, in the same way you would have unfortunately learned to do this as well.
Okay.
Right,
So, Paul, when you hear that you might have learnt the behaviour, I guess that you can look back and go, oh, okay, that's quite helpful, but it doesn't necessarily help you personally. And are you a diagnosed sufferer, or have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been diagnosed. I've been to various psychiatrists, for want of a better word.
And what do you do? What's in your life that you tried to get rid of?
It should, in my opinion, and if other people similar to myself suffer from it to this extent. It's not an illness. It is an illness. It's a disability. And my focus of attention is onto various things at various times. I had a spate where I couldn't drive because I had rearranged things in the glove box of my car. And if I went round the corner and the things fell over, I had to stop the car. I mean, I literally had to stop the car there and then.
Okay.
To put things back in the right order.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, possibly. I just could not continue. If I dropped change out of my pocket and it fell into the car.
Was it upsetting, Paul? Did it frustrate you? Did you get cross with yourself, or did you just go? Did you just live with it?
You have to live with it. I really have no choice. As your colleague on the radio with you now will probably testify. The sense of relief comes from the fact you've actually achieved what your OCD is telling you to do. You actually obey what it's telling you. You do the rituals, and then you feel fine until the next occurrence.
Right.
The stuff with the driving came and went over a period of a year and a half. But then I turned my attention to something else. I now have problems with I can't go out until anyone that I'm expecting to come round the house. That could be the postman. Anyone that's going to walk up the drive of my house, if I don't see where they've walked, what they've been there, what they've touched, if I don't do that, if I have to go somewhere which is, bad enough as it is, I can come back home and I can spend 3-4 hours walking around the garden of our house looking for things that may or may not have moved. And I can guarantee you this, I will do that if it's pouring down with rain.
Okay. Paul, just stay there a second, because it's amazing to hear your story. So I hadn't really appreciated that Paul's highlighted something which his OCD, or whatever we want to call it, has moved from one thing to another. But they don't sound similar, but they obviously sound like a routine.
The OCD never went anywhere. What happened was that the manifestation of it manifested in a different way. It's mutated, if you like, but the OCD has not actually gone anywhere. The underlying reasons why you do this is because you're trying to keep fear at bay. So it's not really about whether it be, what's moved in the garden or what's moved in the glove box. It's about what it represents to you. Disorder and chaos, perhaps. I mean, I'm guessing here because I've not interviewed you. But it'll be whatever it represents to you that's the issue. One thing I would say to you, and this is very, very important that you begin to get your head around this. You said you don't have a choice. You do have a choice. It may not seem like it, and it may be impossible to exercise that choice, but it's important to recognise, at least at some level, that you do have one. What you could try as an experiment, it sounds a little bit flippant, but it's not meant to be, send the behaviour on holiday, even if it's just for a few hours or a day. See what happens. Do an experiment.
Okay, that's the voice of Dr. Trev Roberts. We're going to need to wrap it up there, so I've got a few questions to fire to you, but intriguing to listen to. Hi, Alan, please don't mention my name or anything on this particular issue, which is the classic. So when you're talking about mental health, people don't like that.
Yeah, this is fine.
But I'm wondering about the combination of OCD and phobias. Could you explain the difference between the two, is the first part of the question. And the second bit is, I cannot abide being anywhere near a public convenience. However, I am more than happy to kiss and cuddle animals as much as you like and do all the normal things in life. What's going on? Is that a phobia, or do I have OCD?
Well, it sounds more like a phobia. I mean, a phobia, the difference between phobia and OCD is quite clear. A phobia is a fear of a specific thing. But again, what it has in common with OCD is really it's about a representation. It's not the actual thing that causes the terror. It's something like behind it. And what happens is the mind will find a way to re-represent that in a way that's less traumatic and less scary than the actual real problem. So, it can take a little bit of digging to find out where the real issue lies. But yes, that one sounds like a phobia.
Okay, so phobia perhaps is more specific to a particular situation, whereas obsessive compulsive disorder may drift across different, like we had with our previous
much
caller.
More complex and much more general.
Yeah, and it does. I'm amazed how tolerant people are with their own sort of, I guess you get used to it, don't you? Like most things in life, if you have to spend 3 hours in the garden seeing where someone's walked, then you just go, I'm going to do it.
People even adapt to chronic pain. The mind and the psyche have that ability to adapt to the most distressing factors, but it doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Anonymous text here again. The health profession seems to be obsessed with giving us diagnosis.
I agree.
They want it more than anything else. Mental issues are just part of life. We simply need to learn how to deal with them and then get on with our lives, not being diagnosed and giving everyone a label. This is completely ridiculous.
No, I don't entirely disagree. As I said at the beginning, the DSM, in my view, has got a lot to answer for. I think labels,
DSM,
the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that the psychiatrists use for diagnosis of these various disorders. As I said at the beginning, all mental aberrations or mental health issues are just an exaggeration of perfectly normal behaviour. So there's an entire range. It's only when things become extreme that intervention is required. In a lot of cases, I think this particular call is right. Labels are not necessarily helpful. Having said that, if you have someone who is really struggling and generally wants to find out why they're behaving the way they are and how to do something about it, it can be quite comforting to know, well, actually, that's got a name. It's this.
Sure.
There's a certain amount of comfort to be drawn in that. Whereas if you just go along and, well, I don't know what that is, I haven't got a clue, then they start to feel even more alone with it. So it has its upside and its downside, like everything.
The case studies we've had on talking, I think they would want to know at least where they fit in the world, and that, as we all do, and a title or a brand or a name helps us feel like we're not alone.
Absolutely.
And that's quite traumatic what they've gone through. But, nice to hear the balance in your answer. Trev Roberts has been in the studio. He's been our guest for Friday from Dolphin Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy. They have clinics in Poole and Bournemouth. It's been lovely to meet you.
And you, Alan.
Thank you very much indeed for coming
My
in.
pleasure.
We didn't get a chance really to talk about hypnotherapy, but OCD was fabulous to talk about. Have a lovely weekend.
And you.
Keep an eye on your grammar.
Gladell. Take
You're
care.
not going to keep an eye on your grammar, are you?
Not
Nice
at
to
all.
speak